Hey guys, it is Zach Nunn. I am happy to be down here with Interim Superintendent for Des Moines Public Schools, Matt Smith. Matt and I are really excited to say that there's been some forward momentum in what we're trying to do to help protect schools. Look, Des Moines Public Schools being a partner in this is a clear leader on why this is so important. Earlier this year, we had Des Moines Public Schools and 33,000 kids were involved in a ransomware attack that impacted the school for multiple days. But this is not unique to Des Moines. The reality is right now we are facing a situation across the country where ransomware has become one of the leading targets of cyber intrusions that impact young people. And I speak from experience on this. Being both the senior ranking member when it came to counterintelligence for cybersecurity and serving over 3 years on the National Security Council as Director of Cybersecurity, we have seen ransomware specifically targeting schools across America. Going after our kids means impacting not them just today, but what will happen to them in the future. And these are no longer attackers in basements or individuals who intend to do harm for a one-time profit. These are now nation states, places like North Korea, the Islamic Republican Guard Corps out of Iran, Russian activists who are intentionally looking to steal information that can harm Americans for decades and generations. The reality here is that we have an opportunity now to be a leader. What Iowa has done is to try and identify a way that schools can have that 911 call center to go to. And we're going to take what works here in Iowa to Washington by leading a bipartisan piece of legislation that can really identify three things. One, work with the CISA, the Cyber Infrastructure and Security Agency, to provide a clearinghouse where that information can come in. Again, think of it as a 911 operations center. Two, that we can provide a voluntary Rolodex of information coming in that can be categorized so that the same type of attacks that occur in a place like Des Moines don't get replicated in other communities. And so communities like Des Moines can be aware before a future attack happens. And then finally, providing those resources, that's something that's sustainable, that can be operated year after year, so that schools have this ability to be on the front line of defending against ransomware, being the number one target of ransomware. So let me emphasize again, we have a real threat coming from foreign entities targeting kids. This bill is a bipartisan opportunity to be a leader with Des Moines Public Schools to secure our kids' future, provide schools resources, and make sure that our communities are safe from repeat attacks that now have reached a point to the tune going forward of nearly $250 billion if left unabated. We've seen success stories work across the country. We need to be able to do this for our schools across America, which is why I'm so grateful to have the support of Des Moines Public School and being a champion in fighting with that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Interim Superintendent Matt Smith on this. Matt, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman. Good afternoon. My name is Matt Smith. I'm the Interim Superintendent for Des Moines Public Schools. Back on January 9th, Des Moines Public Schools engaged in what's called a cyber breach. Now, fortunately for Des Moines Public Schools, we've got a technology department that was able to identify the breach quickly, secure it and contain it to prevent further damage, where we quickly began our restoration phases and our data analytics and forensics. We are still in the recovery and restoration phase. I repeat, we started this attack on January 9th, and we are still in our restoration and recovery phases. That's the damage this can do to schools. And so to have legislation like this led by congressmen that supports schools in engaging with experts, cyber experts, as well as superintendents across the state, to know what to do when you have an attack and what are the best possible practices and tactics and strategies to prevent an attack, is an invaluable piece of legislation for us. Our job as experts and educators is to teach children. Teaching children is becoming more and more difficult when we have to worry about the data security of our students, of our staff, and our families. These are threat actors that are looking to gain financial gain based on exploiting students, staff, and family data. Again, as educators, we show up every day to do the best we can for students and for staff and for families in the classrooms, in the cafeterias, in the hallways, and in their homes. So to have a congressman that is doing the work of talking to superintendents, of talking to cyber experts, to allow us an opportunity to engage in best practices across the state, this is the right work. This is what we should be doing together as a bipartisan piece of legislation. This is how we get things done in Iowa.
With that, again, I think this is a model piece of legislation and working with something tangible here that the Des Moines Public Schools have done. Matt and I would be happy to take any questions you have. I would like to note there is an ongoing investigation, so we won't speak to the specific details on this case, but the larger implications that it has. So with it, if anybody's got questions, happy to have the conversation.
On-topic questions, please. Just be respectful of the school.
Yeah, so Dave, great question. Look, no state has got this right. In fact, most states have not even moved forward on this. This is why we're working with a colleague, Congressman Matsui out of California, to say these are areas where it's impacting it. At the federal level, there's absolutely no federal requirement for this. So the reality is that one school could be hit by a cyber attack, and without reporting that or being advised of what to do, that same breach could be replicated in the next school over, and the next school over, and a crescendo effect happens. Standard cybersecurity breach for a school today is going to be to the tune of more than $2 million, and just getting that mitigated. There's a great way to be able to safeguard this, that in that horrible situation where one school district gets hit and they share that information on early, we can build an inoculation across the enterprise. And Matt can probably speak to the fact the days of going to school and being on one computer are a thing of the past. Every kid is taking this home. They're on multiple IPs throughout the day. And the reality is that to be able to get a young person's profile is very, very lucrative for a threat actor, because that's something they can use well up to their 18 with very limited ability for the family or the student to really be able to protect it.
Yeah, you covered it all, Congressman.
You mentioned this was bipartisan. I was wondering if you talked to any folks across the aisle who promised to support it.
Yeah, so it's not only bipartisan, it's bicameral, and I think this is really the important part moving forward. There have been studies asked for this to be done in the past, but it hasn't moved. I've always said the technology will keep up with it. It's the policy that is the slow-moving apparatus in the room. So in the House, we have Representative Doris Matsui. In the Senate, Marsha Blackburn, a Republican from Tennessee, and Mark Warner, a Democrat from Virginia. So it's happening in both the House and on the Senate side. I think that's an important part of this marching forward.
A lot of times when these are foreign actors that are operating through VPNs and operating through oftentimes untraceable ways, how do you, in this legislation, how do you prevent that same actor from doing it to another school when oftentimes you may not be able to trace back to exactly who that individual is?
Yeah, so the question on how do we prevent this or inoculate ourselves is a great question. It's twofold. One, it's informing through the Department of Homeland Security. That really builds up a robust defense so that, Des Moines Public Schools was able to share this, and we can fix those potential weaknesses or the breach that they found to be able to prevent it from going forward. The other aspect on this is that we want the FBI and the Department of Justice to be able to go after the attack vector, and oftentimes just being able to shut down that attack vector is a great way forward. But really, it's a two-pronged approach. In order to defend ourselves, we first have to protect the network, and then we can go after the attacker. But the real threat on the front end is making sure that this type of attack doesn't repeat itself over and over again. And once we find out the profile of the attacker, whether we can stop them at the source is less a concern than do we prevent them from expanding beyond their threat profile.
Yeah, I mean, what I would add to that is from a superintendent's perspective, the opportunity for us to continue to connect with cyber experts, because again, this is not why we joined the profession. We joined the profession to take care of kids and to engage in teaching and learning. So to continue to be able to reach out to these cyber experts to talk about how we actually mitigate and prevent attacks in the future, that's where school districts are having to spend some dollars. And that financial burden on school districts is not money going into the classrooms to serve children in teaching and learning.
Without talking about the case, can you talk about the case? Can you talk about it in a generic way somehow about, like, how did, when you know that you're hit, when you knew that you were hit, what did you do? Can you do that without getting?
I can do that at a very high level. So when we knew that we were hit, we had to shut down systems. And so we literally had to make sure that we got students, staff, and families home, and then make sure that we had our critical functions in place to be able to operate schools safely and securely so that we didn't have any additional breaches beyond that point. And so, like as the Congressman mentioned earlier, all of our systems are tied to the network. And so whether that's how students actually get their lunch or actually how they check out a book, a lot of our classes are online, as you know, and so we had to make sure that our critical functions and making sure that students and staff were going to be safe, and we were positive about that before we could actually bring folks back into the school building. So after we made sure that we went through our critical functions, we then began the recovery sort of restoration phases. What other systems do we need to bring back up online, and how do we make sure that they're secure? So we reached out to a cyber insurance company who also connected us with the state CISO's office to make sure that we were all playing on the same field and that we were operating with integrity and making sure that all of our systems, as they begin to come back up online, are done so safely without any vulnerabilities.
Back right after the breach, district mentioned the letters eventually going out to anyone who was impacted. Has that happened yet?
That is about to happen here in the next couple of weeks. We're again continuing to go through our forensics and our analytics with our cyber insurance company just to make sure that we've got all the details, but those letters are being generated and they'll be mailed out here shortly.
Is there a sense of what the range is, or is that something you're allowed to say?
I am actually not allowed to disclose that at this time.
With this, some of these breaches are, through the network, through the software, but sometimes it's user error of clicking on, something. And when you're talking about being in a teacher shortage, being in a worker shortage, and having staff that's oftentimes overextended, how do you get to every employee to protect the school in the best possible way at a local level and at a federal level as well?
Sir?
Yeah, I think what this bill is going to do is three things. It's going to protect, it's going to prevent, and then it's going to provide the resources. And what the superintendent's highlighted here correctly is we don't want every school district, particularly some of our smaller school districts, to have to spend an inordinate amount of money trying to become what the Department of Homeland Security's true job is, provide this level of integrity for a network. So the very fact that CISA, the Cyber Infrastructure and Security Agency, can provide a template of things that school districts can immediately field, both in the training, both in the awareness, and both in the threat mitigation, goes a long ways to allowing a teacher to spend more time in the classroom and less time trying to make sure that passwords are updated. But here's what I will say. We have seen successes come out of private sector's innovation in this area. In fact, in a lot of areas, we've actually seen a decrease in ransomware. Unfortunately for school districts, just in the last year alone, we have seen a massive uptick. Threat actors know that the soft target right now are schools, and they're going after them aggressively. There's a lot of threat vectors, whether it's a student's iPad or whether it's a school server that they can get into. We have to make sure that our schools have the best Kevlar possible when being able to defend against this. There's a role here for the federal government to be a partner in that, and this is the first step in making sure that Matt gets to spend more time helping kids and less time having to go through what I will say you've done very well in getting parent notifications out in that worst case scenario of alerting a family that their information's been hemorrhaged.